Joining us to discuss this aspect of the story, the underground war that's taking place, is retired General Paul Vallely. He's the chairman of Stand Up America, and it's always great to have you back with us, General.
Thank you, John.
All right, there. So we're hearing now several senior Hamas officials saying that the expansion of the tunnels is part of a broader shift in military tactics. One of the top Hamas leaders in Gaza said, quote, "There are thousands of resistant fighters working underground and thousands of others working above the ground to prepare for the upcoming battle. No one can imagine what the resistance is ready to do to confront the occupiers." Of course, the occupiers in the eyes of Hamas being Israeli. Some would say those are strong words. Some would say it's merely propaganda. What's your take?
Well, I think there's two things here happening. Moving to that third phase by the Israeli forces, the IDF, to completely disarm Hamas, to destroy the tunnels, destroy the rockets, but also to really disorganize and take down the Hamas leadership to make sure that they can't perform in a fashion to conduct future operations against Israel. So when you have that and you have the borders, which really in the south, what we call the Philadelphia line with Egypt there, Egypt has been very good at trying to guard and protect those borders and assist Israel there. At the same time, you have all of those tunnels that have been developed underneath Gaza, which go to basically go to the east part there, which would be the western part of Israel. So they're going to continue to do this, but there should be no ceasefire until Hamas is taken out of action.
Now, we're getting some video here, and we can see that. I can only imagine how difficult it is for the IDF to try and get into these tunnels and neutralize them. And, you think back to past conflicts, the rat holes of the Vietnam War, and plus a lot of the urban fighting that we saw in that war, as well as the Iraq and Afghan wars. Talk about the nightmare scenario that this type of warfare sets up for the soldiers tasked with dealing with it.
Well, I'm personally cognizant of that. When I was a company commander with the 101st Airborne in Vietnam, we had covered really a great network, a very extensive network of tunnels, which were filled with inventories of weapons, ammunition, food that could last any forces occupying those tunnels for an extended period of time. And of course, now they're more advanced, more firmly built with the cement that was brought into Gaza, where you have basically you can stand now and walk through those tunnels to points of exit underground that would come up and be extensively in several hundred meters inside Israel. And so that's why they have to be blown up, but it's much more extensive, much more sophisticated than we had in Vietnam.
And you mentioned the concrete aspect of this, and we talked about this a little bit as well. As we had that pause a while back, humanitarian supplies are brought into Gaza, and one of them sometimes is concrete, which the Palestinians say is being used to reconstruct structures that were bombed out. But as we can see clearly, some of that concrete is being used in these tunnels as well.
Well, absolutely. It was diverted and it was brought in under humanitarian assistance to build buildings and structures, housing, and so on. But Hamas was very clever in diverting those cement supplies into building this underground massive tunnels, basically a city underground that they could operate from. And that also, the underground guards them from the aerial attacks that the Israelis can deliver with their Air Force. So that's very advanced. Now, the same thing has happened up in southern Lebanon, by the way, with Hezbollah. They have dug tunnels underneath up there, too. And we haven't seen Hezbollah act yet in this whole operational area over there. And so Israel has to be very cognizant now of 60 to 70,000 rockets in southern Lebanon, with also Shahab rocket capability from the Valley.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more, General. We just showed we showed a map which showed some of the tunnels that have been exposed between Gaza and Israel. You mentioned additional tunnels between Lebanon and Israel, which would be north of what we're seeing right here on this map. We also heard yesterday about the potential of increased direct involvement from Hezbollah. Of course, Hezbollah supports Hamas spiritually, I guess you could say, but there might be more involvement from Hezbollah. Talk to us about that aspect of the story.
Well, Hezbollah is very well organized. They get something like 300 to 350 million dollars equivalent from the Iranians every year. They have a very sophisticated telecommunication system along the border, very extensive rocket placements in buildings, as well as in forested areas in southern Lebanon there. And they also have dug those tunnels, which we reported from Stand Up America about 2 years ago from our intelligence analyst over in the Middle East. So we know they're prepared up there. So Benjamin Netanyahu's got a really serious threat up there, and I'm sure he's looking at it. The Golani Brigade, which was up in Syria, has been moved to some degree to reinforce the forces down in Gaza. But keep in mind, one of the primary objectives of Hezbollah with their rockets is to take down and neutralize the Israeli airfield. So basically, they can keep aircraft on the ground. Now, it's interesting that we haven't seen any aggressive moves yet from Hezbollah, but they have to know that threat is there and it can happen anytime.
Certainly, of course, Hezbollah might be a little busy right now, too, because they're actively participating in what's taking place in the Syrian civil war as well.
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah, and we mentioned
They're
that.
Very well organized, very well financed, very well armed.
Yes, of course, in a great area of concern here. Now, what could potentially Hezbollah do to the discussion about a ceasefire? Because there is some potential, at least reports anyway, that we might be on the verge of a ceasefire here.
Well, I don't think we're on a verge at this point in time, because from the Israeli standpoint, because they need to accomplish their mission, and that's basically to neutralize and take Hamas out of action. So I don't see that coming, and not encouraged or optimistic like Bill Richardson has said or has positioned Kerry, that in fact that will be carried out within a couple of days. I doubt that very seriously. Israel should not quit at this point in time. They've got to really demilitarize and to neutralize those Hamas forces, or else we're going to continue to see conflict for the future, and that's not good for the Middle East.
Well, certainly Israel seems to be pushing deeper into Gaza now, and they don't seem to be taking their foot off the gas at all. Do you think, we've talked about many past cases of similar conflicts between Hamas and the Israelis, but anything right now to you, General, seems different about this? Is there anything you can put your finger on that might signal this could be once and for all the end of Hamas inside Gaza?
Well, I think the difference is the amount of money that's gone in to support Hamas over the years that has been given in humanitarian aid, for example, to the Palestinian Liberation Organization. So they have really been reinforced by Hezbollah, by Iran, by other terrorist support organizations. And so they've been better prepared to conduct these operations, as you can see with the thousands of rockets that have been launched from Gaza into Israel. So you have a more sophisticated, better trained terrorist organization than you had before. So that's the challenge of the Israeli Defense Forces and the command structure of Israel, to be able to plan out and, again, destroy their capability to launch rockets or to conduct any kind of military operations against Israel.
All right, General Paul Vallely, always great to have you with us here, and always great to talk to you and get your insight, because many of us don't have the insight and knowledge of what's actually taking place there as you do, having spent a lot of your time over there in that region. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, John.
All right, there you have it from General Paul Vallely, who has looked into this issue very closely. We got his insight on what's taking place not only in Gaza, but also potentially on the northern border of Israel with Lebanon. There's also some reports now that Hezbollah may be getting involved somehow in the conflict in Gaza and in the Middle East in a greater perspective. We'll keep our eye on that aspect of the story. Of course, much more to come here on America's Forum. Straight ahead, we also want to get more of your comments on some of the top news making news today. You can reach out to us. And coming up, we're going to discuss the president's West Coast trip and his use of economic patriotism. His words, are tax shelters un-American? We'll talk to two folks about that.